The little Dacia Spring has finally sprung into the UK, and I for one could not be happier about it. I love small affordable cars, and that is exactly what the Dacia Spring is, giving people the opportunity to get into a brand new electric vehicle with change from £20,000, and quite a bit of it as well. But does that low cost come at a compromise? Well, of course, but in today's video, I'm going to tell you everything I love and not so love about the Dacia Spring. So if that sounds good, then please keep watching. If you like new car reviews and car content, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you had any further questions or queries, or if you wanted to take one for a spin for yourself, then you can do that at the John Banks dealers. I'll pop all their details down below. So before we begin with the review, let me tell you all the key details that you need to know about the Dacia Spring.
It's compact, at just 3.7 metres long and less than 1.8 metres wide, including the door mirrors. There are standard fit rear parking sensors, upgraded to front and rear, plus a reversing camera in this top spec extreme model. As you can imagine, the Spring can only carry 4 on board, probably just as well when you hear about the power. There's a 44 and a 64 brake horsepower version. Both have the same 26.8 kilowatt-hour battery and a WLTP claimed range of 140 miles.
When it comes to charging, unlike many micro-car rivals, the Dacia Spring can accept DC charge, but only up to 30 kilowatts. That means if you find a fast charger on the go, then you can go from about 20 to 80% in about 45 minutes. But where I see the Dacia Spring being better utilised is using a home charger, especially a 7 kilowatt-hour home charger. Find one like that, like I've got here, and then that means that you can get the same amount of 20 to 80% charge in about 4 hours. Now I know that that's longer, but it does mean that it's going to cost you a lot less, because chargers like this are often much cheaper than fast chargers. Plus, there's a lot more of them, especially when you can utilise the network and utilise apps like Juice Up.
Turn your own EV charger into an income generator with Juice Up, the app that lets you rent out your charger to other drivers using a friendly online community to make a little money back. But as a member, you also can access bookable, affordable and reliable EV charging in places where public chargers may be unavailable. It works both ways. And with promo code AUTOSOCIAL, you can enjoy 180 days free with 0 service charges. So download Juice Up for iPhone and Android today and electrify your journeys.
The first generation Dacia Spring was actually forbidden fruit for us in the UK. We never received that model. But you don't need to mourn it too hard when we get this, the second generation, which is a very striking looking car, if I say so myself. It shares design elements that you'll find on current and future Dacia models, including the Dacia Duster and the incoming Bigster. And that's the front fascia around here with the white designs that lead together with the Dacia badge and then continued to those Y-shaped daytime running lights. I think it's a very good looking car, and I like the fact that they've gone for some interesting colourways. You get this fantastic orange, and I really have a soft spot for that pastel-y blue colour. I think that looks great, especially contrasting with the bronze elements that you get on the top spec extreme model like I have on this one here. And you get bronze door mirrors, and you also get bronze inserts in those hubcaps. Around the front of the car, something I'm not too sure on is that frontal design. Now this does remind me of unfinished production models when they cover them in the camo print, but maybe that's just me because I spend so much time looking at brand new models. This does actually have a function, however. If you was to damage the car at the front or back and you didn't want to completely replace that piece of the car, you could just peel off the vinyl sticker and re-stick it on, which I actually think is quite good. Now, talking about these wheels, so you get 16-inch wheels, but they're not alloys, these are steelies, which I don't have too much of an issue with. What I do have an issue with is the brand of tyre. These are Linglong tyres, and if you turn the wheel, you'll really notice they're very, very small tyres. Hit a pothole in one of these and you're going to know about it. If I think I replace a lot of wheels in my Up GTI, I think you're going to go through even more on the Dacia Spring if you are covering quite a few miles. And I think it's worth taking that extra pocket money that you have left over from buying the car and upgrading all 4 tyres. But that's just my personal opinion. Around the back you get a similar vinyl sticker on the back bumper, and I also really like this textured design across the rear, and you get the Dacia which is almost sunken into that. I really quite like it. Small rear window, but you still have a rear wiper, so they've not scrimped out on one of those, and overall it just has a slightly more jacked up appearance than the front of the car. As many of you may already know, I work closely alongside the John Banks Group, and I also create content for them on their YouTube channel, John Banks Reviews. And what I'd like to do is any questions that you had about the Dacia Spring that I've not answered in this video, maybe they're a bit obscure, ask them down below, and I'm going to try to answer as many as possible over on the John Banks Review channel. But on this one today, let's check out the interior. So straight away, you can hear a bit of the quality when you shut the doors. It doesn't sound the nicest. You've got the thin material on the outside, and then you've got the cheap plastic on the doors, which don't make the nicest sound when you shut them. But I don't see that as being too much of an issue. And elsewhere in the cabin, you will find an overwhelming amount of plastic. You've got it on the steering wheel, you've got it across the dashboard, and pretty much everywhere. But what I do like is they've used colours and textures to brighten up the plastic. And I think it's worked. It's made it interesting. You've got kind of this chrome coloured plastic here on the steering wheel, nice buttons on the steering wheel. You've also got some green on the centre with these bronze elements on the air vents, which I all think is quite nice. You've got this like white textured across this kind of cubby hole in front of the passenger. You've got white inside of the doors, and then you've got this texture across the doors, which is also in the new Dacia Duster. I really quite like it. It is cheap and cheerful, but I do think it still looks appealing, although this is the higher spec model, so that means you get those elements like the chrome inside of the air vents, and you also get these lovely seats. I really like these seats. They're this dark blue colour down below, and then you've got this green leather effect up top with the Dacia logo embossed in it, and then you've got this kind of dappled effect in the centre, and these are actually really comfortable. And then they're just finished off with the bronze stitching. These feel really quite nice. It's a really easy car to use actually. You've got loads of buttons on the steering wheel for controlling your digital dashboard in the centre there, and then you've got your cruise control on the left hand side, although it's just standard cruise, no adaptive. You've got your volume controls behind the steering wheel, just like every Renault. And in the centre, you've actually got quite a few buttons. You've got physical climate control dials, which are really quite nice to use, and then you've got some shortcut buttons here which include your active safety. So that's if you wanted to quickly turn off your traffic sign recognition or your lane assist and different features like this. The touchscreen, now that is only on the higher spec models. If you go for the entry level model, you just get a clip. Although I've lived with my Up GTI with just a clip for ages, I don't see it as being too much of an issue, but if you want something a bit more luxurious, then you can go for this, and it gets the satellite navigation built in and Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so that does feel quite nice. You've also got some buttons on top, an off button, and to turn up and down your volume. So with all the interior covered, I think it's about time I jumped in the driver's seat and we took it for a spin. What are my first impressions of driving the Dacia Spring? Well, I have to say, I'm really quite impressed, and it's better and slightly more composed than I was expecting. What I will say is if you've been put off of this car because of the performance figures, then I urge you to take it for a test drive, because it's certainly not as slow as the figures may lead you to believe. You see, this is the higher powered model, this is the 65. It gets a whopping 65 brake horsepower and will sprint from 0 to 62 in just under 14 seconds. And that does sound slow. But compare it to a 65 brake horsepower petrol car and it's non-comparable, because you get the instant torque from the accelerator. With this being an electric car, the power is instant, so at low speeds it actually feels rather nippy. And I haven't just been doing low speeds in this car either. I've been on a lot of higher 60 back roads, and also I did some driving on the A14. And it's a lot more impressive than I was expecting. I really was expecting it to be a little bit hard to live with when it came to the motorways. But though the power isn't instant when you get past 40, it does actually build speed quite nicely, and I can't see you needing much more power than this unless you're a real power freak. And then sure, if you like your performance cars, possibly this isn't the one for you. But if you're worried about the power, then I would urge you to take it for a test drive, because you'll probably be quite pleasantly surprised. The one thing I can't get used to, however, with this car is the seating position. You really do sit up really high, and the roofline comes down quite low, and I'm feeling like I want to be much lower to be able to see through the windscreen. But the positive is how economical the Dacia Spring is. You see, there are benefits to being small and light, and that's despite this car having a pretty small battery. It's actually able to get really good efficiency because it's not carrying around loads and loads of weight. I've been seeing about 5 miles per kilowatt hour, which is really impressive. And that means it's going to get the real top end of those range figures, which is always a bonus. Even on the motorway, I was seeing about 3.9 miles per kilowatt hours, which still isn't too bad and is possibly comparable to a performance EV. Where I feel that this car loses a little bit of its composure is in how light the steering is. This car has been set up to be a city car, and I saw a couple of people complaining on some of the videos that I watched that they kind of hate that they're always called city cars, because ultimately there's quite a lot of us that live in the country like me that quite like small cars, and we want to enjoy them as well. And I think that if they made the steering just a little bit heavier, it would definitely have a bit more connection. You lose a bit, it feels a bit vague when you're going around the back roads, when you're going around corners. In fact, you're never really quite sure how fast you can take the corners, because it doesn't exactly fill you with confidence. It's not going to help because of how thin those wheels are either, and my eyes are constantly scanning the road, making sure that I don't hit a pothole, because I do have PTSD from my own car with small wheels, and I just don't want to have to replace one of these Linglongs, although I'm pretty sure I could find some spare change which would pay for one of those Linglong tyres. But that's not the point. You don't want to have to be constantly changing your tyres and worrying about things like that. But outside of the slight loss of composure, it's just quite a nice car to drive. It's really direct. Because of that light steering, it means that when you're manoeuvring around tight spaces, tight country roads, or when you're parking or need to do a turn in the road, it's really, really good. It feels super small and agile and nimble, which is definitely not always the case with a lot of modern cars. So with the driving experience being a bit of a mixed bag, next up let's talk about practicality, and starting with the boot space on offer. So inside the boot of the Dacia Spring, it's actually incredibly impressive. You get 308 litres of space. That's more than the Fiat 500 electric, and it's actually more than things like the Vauxhall Corsa or the Peugeot E208. So that's really surprising. It is quite basic inside here, however. You don't get any 12-volt charging, no fancy hooks or anything like that. It is just a bog standard boot, but should be more than enough for most people. So the boot is a bit of a superpower, but surely that does have to have compromises elsewhere, right? And yes, there is. And that's inside of the rear of the Dacia Spring. Ah, yes. That's much more compact, although not entirely uncomfortable. I'm about 5'5", 5'6". I've never actually properly measured myself. I probably should, considering I always mention it in videos. But I've got a couple of inches of legroom, couple of inches of headroom, and I really do not feel too cramped back here. Although, of course, I only want to do it on short journeys and amenities are not ideal. There is some ISOFIXes on the outside edges, and I have got electric windows in the back here, but I haven't got any cup holders or any access to any charging and things like that. But for very short journeys, it is good. And I do think that Dacia have been quite clever in the way that they've looked at the Spring. They've understood their target audiences. Many people are not going to be using the back seats of the Spring. Therefore, it makes more sense to give that space to the boot rather than the people sitting in the back. I've always been a sucker for small cars with big personality, and the Dacia Spring has personality by the bucket load. In fact, every time I criticise this car, I feel like I'm hurting its feelings. But it is glaringly obvious that the Dacia Spring does give fantastic value for money, although some things are compromised. I don't really like the driving position and I'd throw the linglong straight in the bin. But other than that, compare it to the competition and it seems like a very good package. Of course, there is always the option of going for a second-hand EV for a similar price, and you might get a longer range, a more luxurious interior and more space. But you don't get the benefit of a brand new car with brand new warranty packages. It's a lot of things to weigh up. Personally, I really do love the Dacia Spring, but it would need to be a second car because it's not perfect in every single way. Find me a car that is. I really hope you have enjoyed this video today, guys. If you have, please go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Let me know all your thoughts and feelings about the Dacia Spring. Would you go for one or would you go for a second-hand EV instead? Let me know your comments down below. Of course, if you did have any further questions or queries, or if you wanted to take one out for a spin, then you can do that at the John Banks dealers. I'll pop their details down below. Until next time, guys. See you later.